My name is Emma, and we are in Machias, Maine, at the Five and Dime in the Beehive's. I don't know. The Beehive's like the room where we display a lot of our work. Yeah, so the Beehive is an all-volunteer collective of artists and activists and educators who create um, these very intricate graphics using animals and plants to tell stories that are shared with us on listening trips. So, for example, this graphic that I do the most work with, Mesoamerica Resiste, is about communities throughout Mesoamerica, which is southern Mexico through Panama, resisting mega projects that are threatening to displace them and destroy their ecosystems and communities. And so, yeah, these graphics are created collectively and anonymously. They're all anti-copyright, and yeah, they tell these stories using basically like cartoons to talk about capitalism and colonialism and just these big economic and social systems that affect all of us, not just folks in the regions that we're focusing on. These we work with metaphors, and so a lot of the stories and a lot of the analysis that we include in our work could really be talking about anywhere in the world. And so that's one big component of what the Beehive does, is producing these graphics and then using them for education. And then also we are based in Machias, Maine, right here, and we do a lot of local work where we basically restore old buildings for community use. And so the building that we're in right now is the old Five and Dime, over a century ago. And I think up until the 50s and 60s, this was a working Five and Dime, and we're turning it into a community print shop. And there's going to be a lot of different spaces in here that have different like cultural and education purposes. And then we have other buildings as well, like a Grange Hall that we restored in town, and a community kitchen that we're building. I work with the Beehive in a lot of different ways, but primarily I do education work. So I travel around mostly North America and present this graphic, Mesoamerica Resiste, and do workshops and popular education presentations with it. And then here in Machias, I'm often sort of helping out with other aspects of the organization, figuring out how to arrange our space and invite volunteers and orient them, and generally like help the organization function well. Well, I have known for a really long time that I am interested in education and in figuring out ways to talk about the way that we choose to exist as human beings together and in relation to the world. I've always been really interested in challenging power dynamics and capitalism and thinking about how to dismantle systems of oppression in the world. And for me, education has been a really key piece of that. I had known about the Beehive's work for like years before I got involved. I, yeah, I had seen a lot of their projects, and when I was living in Mexico, I was actually studying with the Zapatistas in Chiapas and came across a Beehive poster there in the main community center, and spent a lot of time analyzing it with friends there, and just became really intrigued by what a powerful tool it is. It's both like so creative and visually engaging, but also like really blunt in its analysis um, of systems of power, of colonization, of, you know, like corporate globalization. So instead of using all of these jargony terms that I just use, like capitalism and colonialism and globalization, really exploring those themes through stories, through stories that real people have shared with us about how they have been impacted by those issues, and then using plants and animals from a region to express those stories visually, like really draws that connection between how these issues affect humans and how they affect the natural world, and drawing the connection between biodiversity and cultural diversity. And sort of like Beehive graphics really have a way of tying things together, like tying together the huge, big picture that's really overwhelming with like personal stories and starting from a very specific place. And anyway, so I just thought that this was an incredible tool, and people see these graphics and they want to like come over and talk to you about it and get in a conversation about it. And I have just found it to be an incredible way to do education about these topics. And so anyway, last year the Beehive put out a call for volunteers that they were looking to bring on new long-term bees. And so I applied at that time, and that's how I started doing this work. When I'm in Machias, I get to live in the Clark Perry house, which is our communal living and working space. Really beautiful, old house right in the middle of town here. And so I don't have to pay rent, which is great. And sometimes, like this summer, I got to eat for free because we had brought on a volunteer to coordinate getting donations from farms and businesses around Maine. And the organization just like had set things up this summer so that we would have like bulk communal food and like a food system in place. But other parts of the year, I use food stamps, or I figure out other ways to feed myself. And I, when I'm on tour with the Beehive, which is in the fall or the spring usually, like the tour expenses cover my transportation and food needs. But yeah, I'm like broke most of the time. I don't really like. It's great because as a volunteer in this like rural place, I don't actually spend a lot of money. I don't need a lot of money because I don't know. We make our own fun, and there's like nowhere to go spend money, nothing to buy. And I really love living in a culture like that. And at the same time, sometimes it is hard to be always broke, but I feel really lucky to be able to spend all of my time doing something that I care about and that I have a say in how it all works. And so, yeah, it's been really wonderful. And I do work, like I have like a month of work in the summertime, so I have usually a little bit of employment during the year. I actually haven't been around from the beginning of a graphics project. But I can tell you that it's like each of the posters is drawn by a group of people. This Plan Mesoamerica poster had over 13 different illustrators and over 25 different people who collaborated with like research and design, metaphor stuff. And then, but really the artists in a lot of ways are translators of these stories that are shared. So that's one of the reasons why the work is anti-copyright and anonymous, is because it's not like the collective came up with this. This is like a translation of all of these stories, of all of these like huge issues that a lot of people have shared their perspective on, and then the Beehive finds ways to draw that in metaphor. And then, so there's a huge emphasis on like, not taking ownership of the art in that way, and really letting it not only reflect all of those voices that are a part of creating it, but also be something that people are continuously finding their own stories in, their own new stories in, and even the like stories that were not part of the original listening trip are just as relevant to this graphic, because people can see themselves in it. They can see the story of their family or the history of the place that they live. This graphic has over 400 different species of plants and animals that are all native to the regions where the stories came from. And so a lot of them have a lot of cultural significance, and the species choice itself is a metaphor. And so there are people who do research about a lot of different aspects of that, and in some scenes, the species has a trait that's like, for example, we have a scene of women on the front lines of resisting militarism in their communities. And each of the species in that scene is chosen because the female of that species has some particularly fierce defense mechanism. And so, for example, one of those species is the horned toad, which can shoot blood out of its eyes up to 5 feet away. And it's awesome. And the horned toad lives in the deserts in northern Mexico. And that's also a region where there's a huge problem of violence against women, and like it's known as femicide because it's so prevalent, and so many women have been murdered and disappeared and abused. And so this horned toad represents, in this picture, represents like women fighting back against that, and she's holding an urn and a plaque that says Justicia, justice, and she's wearing a veil. All of those are symbols that women who are organizing in northern Mexico against this violence use in their marches and in their movement. And so that's like one of the examples where this like connection is made between between a particular species that has significance in a place and a human struggle. And so there are people who will do all that research and put all that together, and then artists who will make like multiple sketches of it and like figure out what this animal, how it should be moving or how it should be placed in relation to the rest of the graphic. And then all of these sketches get sort of moved around until a bigger graphic form starts taking shape, and then it all gets drawn on these huge pieces of paper and then redrawn 3 times in this case.
This entire thing was redrawn 3 times?
Each time it was slightly different, like it was redrawn because it was redesigned, but yeah.
I've always imagined them as like cut out pieces that are layered together. But
yeah.
Like actually drawn as one big.
Yeah, it's actually all drawn on one piece. Yeah, it's pretty wild.
Wait, so this sorry, this is the like actual drawing.
Yeah, this is the original. This is like the thing that if you go up close, you'll see all the original ink and pen strokes. There's a little burn in there from one time when somebody left the drawing magnifying glass over it and went to lunch, and they came back and it was like smoking and was not repaired, and it's left there as a reminder of like the impermanence of art. Mortality of all things.
Wow.
Yeah, going on tour is a big part of what we do, both to support the organization in terms of like we are able to fundraise while we're on tour, but also it's the way that we do education with these, and our mission is to cross pollinate the grassroots, we call it, and so basically what we want is for people to use these graphics in their own work for education and organizing. And hopefully through the funds that we are able to raise on tour in North America, we aim to print and distribute half of our graphics in the region where the stories came from. So in this case, we're working right now on trying to distribute materials in Mesoamerica, in the region where folks are fighting these struggles against mega projects that are displacing them. And so this, on the tour that I'm about to take this fall, that I'm organizing right now, I'm hoping to collaborate with people in the Northeast who are organizing against mega infrastructure projects that are threatening communities in the Northeast, and draw those connections and show how, although we are talking specifically about the way this kind of development is impacting communities in Mesoamerica, we're also talking about how in Maine there's a huge struggle about water privatization right now, for example, or like they're trying to build energy corridors through the state to transport, oil. And right now there's trains of really volatile fracked gas being brought by rail through the state, and it's incredibly dangerous and potentially very destructive. And all of these energy corridors are bisecting communities and having a lot of similar effects as to what we're talking about. So drawing those connections so that people who are organizing in Maine around these issues don't just have the not in my backyard mindset where they're only against, like fracked oil if it's affecting their future and like the safety of their families, and really helping people develop this larger analysis that like actually we're all fighting the same system here in different ways from different perspectives or affected by it differently, but that there's really a need to unite those stories and come up with a bigger strategy of resistance, and build networks of solidarity.